In a nation divided, where immigration policies spark fierce battles and deep emotions, two opposing points collide in an explosive showdown. One steadfast Trump supporter defends a president's controversial legacy. One passionate critic demands justice, humanity, and due process. Borders, enforcement, race, rights. In 2025, the stakes have never been higher. This is the debate America needs, the answers America seeks. Prepare yourselves, because when these two worlds collide, the truth will emerge. This is Head to Head, debating immigration policy with IT Goatee Brad.
Hello.
What do you think of that?
That's pretty good. Although I certainly don't claim to have all of the answers on everything.
I'm hearing myself echo.
Do you have a monitor on? Or?
Yeah, somewhere I have an echo going on. Oh, here we go. Here we go. All right, we're good. We're good. All right, so we're here. This is a day 2 of, we were going to do this last night, Brad, but you very fairly said, yeah, it's like midnight for me over here. So I was like, that's a fair point. Fine, I'll do by myself.
Midnight on a Monday night going into Tuesday is definitely not how I want to be spending my work day.
Yeah, I'm supposed to be taking a vacation this week. Whether or not it's actually a vacation is anybody's guess. Well, yeah, so I was left to my own devices and I had a lot to say. I was planning on doing like a 45-minute stream. It turned into an hour and 45 minutes.
I still think it was good, though, because it allowed you to air your thoughts uninterrupted and say most of what you believe, which is, everyone is entitled to their own opinion. And you had a few commenters saying a few things, but for the most part, it was your unbridled thoughts from a person most concerned about immigration policy and where things are headed with this administration 4 months in.
Well, it was more, yes, immigration policy, but not just immigration policy, just a guy who's concerned about the direction of the nation. I don't know if could you even hear me, Brad?
Yeah.
Are you like popping in and out, or is that my connection? Do you have a bad connection?
I think you have a bad stream going in and out.
I really hope we don't start having connection issues. Hey, Jocelyn, is your internet okay?
Maybe not.
Well, we're just going to have to muddle through. It says I got a good connection, so we're just going to keep on going. But yeah, it was I have concerns about the direction of the country, and I reference a lot of civil rights stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Shit. You know what I might have to do? I might have to, hey, Brad, why don't you, and I'm going to have to reset my router and see if that helps. I'm going to reset the router. Yeah,
well,
but preview what you're going to say. There's not like, all right.
Okay.
Oh, shit.
Well, even if he turns off the camera, audio comes through okay, but it certainly means that the internet is still misbehaving. It's my job to take over streams. It seems like that's what I do best. Megan disappears or has to do something, then I've got to run her streams, all kinds of other stuff. But, to kind of preview where this or where I would like to see this discussion lead to is we really, when we're discussing about immigration policy, is there's a lot of politicians have been talking about immigration policy for almost millennia now. And we can take it as far back as the 80s when Ronald Reagan was in the White House, which some people weren't even born when he was in the White House, like me, for example. And in 1986, there was a push to grant amnesty to those who were here illegally. And they said this will be a one-time measure to get those who were uncovered through the system, give them the citizenship that they so deserved, and we will take all of the measures to ensure that this doesn't happen again. And for the next 30, almost 40 years, we are still talking about immigration, how it's broken, and how we now need to give new rounds of amnesty to people because they weren't covered by the first set. And one second. My son was meandering into the office, but for
I'm back.
welcome back.
So I don't know. Hopefully that fixed it, but I missed everything that you just said.
Well, it happens.
Yeah.
But I said that the topic of immigration, politicians have been talking about immigration for millennia now, and even going far back as the 80s when Ronald Reagan was in discussions with a democratically held House and Senate on what needs to happen to people who are here illegally, and comes to find out that after one round of immigration and promises from politicians that this issue would get solved, it's still not solved.
But when you say it's not solved, when you say that, because I've been hearing politicians rail on about the evils of immigration policy in America for all my life, my entire life. And, people have criticized, the amnesty provision, for example, like in 87, that was Reagan. They've criticized virtually every single president with respect to our open borders policy, which is not actually an open borders policy. Like, you don't just get to come in and just disappear. I know that happens, but it happens in every country. And so this idea that, look, here's my beef with Trump. It's like I was telling you earlier over text. You and I don't even disagree really all that much about what should happen with respect to immigration policy. I believe that if you're a criminal, you shouldn't be allowed to stay here. I believe that you shouldn't be here without status and with no path to status. I believe that. You believe that. The problem that I have is in 2025, in this new administration, Trump has went full on rogue. And I sent you, I think, over a dozen examples of people that have been deported, not even counting Kilmar, when they had legal status, when they were here on visas, when they were U.S. citizens, a variety of different ones. I've tried to pin down a statistic that pinned down the actual percentage of criminals that were deported to, without due process, whatever, beside the point, but actual criminals, like Trump said, that's what he wanted to do. The highest estimate that I've seen out there is like 25%. The lowest estimate is like 8 confirmed cases out of however many hundreds. And I'm sure the truth is somewhere in the middle. The point is, you start rounding up folks that are here minding their own business because they were at a Palestinian rally or whatever on a college campus, which is supposed to be this free-wielding exchange of ideas and thoughts and education. And you start implementing DEI strategies to remove people of color from prominent positions with no other explanation that, it's a person of color, it must be DEI. And there's no protocol established to figure out, number one, what does DEI mean to you? Because it sounds like you're just meaning to say that people of color shouldn't hold prominent positions in government lest they be, I guess, DEI. Is that what DEI is?
Well, we're going far off topic from immigration, but
I'm tying it in. And the reason I framed it like that is because I was making an argument yesterday that it appears that this administration is not so concerned about the criminal immigrants that are here because we've done away with them. And honestly, the numbers of the criminal numbers of illegal immigrants, as defined under the immigration codes, is minuscule compared to that of United States citizens. It just is. And we've already had measures in place that were focusing on removing criminals, and expeditiously. Like there's legit, like you sent me a code, it was like, hey, we have the right to expedite removal proceedings. Yeah, you sure do. But that still doesn't do away with due process. Was my next sentence was going to be, because I was at the gym and we were like texting back and forth and wanted to save it for today's show. It's like, yeah, sure, there is expedited removals. You could catch somebody and determine within a couple of weeks, maybe less, that they are removable. They don't have status. They've committed crimes. They don't have a basis to stay. There's no pending applications. They're gone, and expeditiously. And they don't just, like, they're not walking around, like they're held in like these ICE detention centers. And I don't know if you've ever been to one of those, but it's like the equivalent of being sent to state prison. Like there's no difference between that place and the prisons that I visit to talk with some of my clients. There's none. And so if we already have those provisions in place, and that's seemingly the driving force behind Trump's immigration policies, he's somehow going to fix what has already been. But he's not fixed it. It's kind of the same thing like in 2016. In 2016, he tried to implement all of these illegal immigration policies that ran afoul of the Constitution. The difference between that time period and this one is that nobody is holding his hand and nobody is there to hold him back from what he's wanting to do. He's ignoring court orders. They're still telling him that his policies are unconstitutional. They're still telling him that you got to give people due process. They're still telling him that you got to bring back the people that you've already deported, and he's not doing it. And at the same time, I went over a case yesterday where it's like, well, wait a minute. There's like 60 people that had applied for asylum in South Africa, I think back in February. And they were claiming that they were experiencing severe racism. And look, maybe they are. But he's completely shut off that form of application to people from non-white countries. I look at that and I couple that with DEI and I ask myself, what's actually going on here? And then logically, that ties into Project 2025. A portion of it, not the full thing. Like there's way more stuff to it than that. But it seems to me, even if you don't believe that this is what Trump is trying to do, I feel like the people around him are trying to do this. And if Stephen Miller is the one that is promoting these immigration policies, and he's a well-documented, well-known, and unabashed white nationalist, then my fear is for where this country is headed and where the argument that I was making yesterday, and I know it was like this rambling discussion about like the history of civil rights in our country. It's like, look, what do you expect is going to happen when you transform ICE into the German Gestapo circa 1930s and 40s, and they start ripping people that are here legally, minding their own business, indiscriminately, but for they have darker colored skin, shipping them off to countries without giving them the opportunity to be represented by an attorney, to have a due process hearing where we can establish whether or not they're even here legally or not. Because like there's a couple of cases where they literally removed college students that were here on student visas, here legally, no crimes, no anything. They just were at the wrong rally, I guess. And they're still being held in a detention center 1,000 miles away from their home. And what is the point of all of that? Because under any other administration, even Trump's back in 2016, those students would have been done with this by now within a couple of days. It would have been done and over with. You know why? Because we had in place expedited proceedings for people that were accused of needing deportation, like immediately. It's already there. It's already there. The only difference between now and then is now we're just doing it without due process. And so when that is going on, and I think, Brad, that I really believe this. I really believe that you and I have similar thoughts on immigration, but you're stuck on this idea that not all illegal immigrants deserve due process. And what you told me, I think what you were trying to explain to me the last time we had this conversation, and I didn't really give you a chance to explain, was that, well, when people are here illegally, doesn't that make them criminal? And no, it doesn't. That's a completely different body of law. There's two questions that are asked. The first is, does this person have status? Are they a citizen? Are they here on some kind of legal visa, whatever? And if the answer is no, do they have a path to status? Yes or no. But if they're here without status, then they are here illegally in terms of the immigration code. It doesn't make them criminal, because the second question that they ask is, have they committed crimes? Are they an actual criminal? In other words, under the federal penal code, any of the 50 states penal codes, etc. They're two completely separate analyses. And Stephen Miller's attempt to refashion that specific fact as if they were one and the same to support his unconstitutional argument that they don't deserve due process I feel like is what's going on. And I feel like that's where you get confused with this whole thing, because I feel like you've bought into some of that rhetoric because it was presented to you in a way that made sense, but bears no semblance of reality in the way that the laws have been interpreted for hundreds of years now. Anyway, what have you to say in response to that?
I don't know. That's a mighty large framing of a question.
I know.
In a lead up.
Feel free to cut me off next time before I threw a lot in there.
It's your show, so I don't like cutting you off. But so I think a lot of the immigration discussion, like when you were saying at the beginning there, is you say, well, we prioritize criminals, and then we try and figure out, do they have a path otherwise? Yeah. But the problem with that framing is that what that essentially means is that anyone who desires to get into the country, once they cross the border, then they are basically given the green light, and then say, well, if you don't have a prior criminal conviction, and you then say, well, I'm going to apply for a refugee status or asylum or all these other things, which would be your path. Whether or not it's a valid path or not is a different question.
Let's stick with asylum. Let's just stick with that.
But you go there, you claim asylum, and then now you are then basically allowed to go about the country as you will. And then even if they deny your asylum claim, or then issue you a final deportation order, as long as you check in with ICE every year as you're required to, you're not actually told to leave.
Okay. Well, you're wrong on all of those things. When you apply for asylum, what happens? I know you know the answer to this. What happens when you apply for asylum?
You try and make a claim for persecution by your government, or...
Yes, they identify you, right? They figure out where you're going to stay. They figure out your name, your number, your address. They keep tabs on you. You're supposed to check in, whatever. If you have no valid claim to asylum, you're expeditiously deported. If you make a prima facie case for asylum, then they'll give you a court date and you'll be given due process and all of that. And there's very strict rules for how that works. And it's all very streamlined, or it used to be when I used to practice. So they keep tabs on you. You're not just allowed to come over willy-nilly. Now, I'm not going to say that there aren't people that do that, but those people tend to not apply for applications. They just come over and they're here. Or they were here and they were brought over when they were a child, like 6 months old or 2 years old or 7 years old. And this is the only home they've ever known as a grown person. And so this idea that they're just here and just allowed to go wherever they want to go is just a misnomer. It's not true. Second of all, you highlighted asylum. What do you think about these South Africans? All of them being white of color were allowed to apply for asylum. They were chartered in from South Africa to America. It's a great fanfare. There was literally like a greeting party there for them. They got in on the basis that they've experienced extreme
they're being persecuted racially by their government. That's what asylum, one of the claims is that if you're being persecuted by your government for one of the immutable traits.
Yeah.
Or by color, creed, or identity would be an easier way to describe it. Then you would have a valid asylum claim if you can prove that.
Okay, but the people that make these asylum claims all say that. People from Guatemala, people from El Salvador, people from Mexico, people from whatever country.
That's not what's told to the people. People who say that or people, especially in the media, are saying they're economic refugees or they're fleeing gang violence.
Yeah, well, that's the problem with what you're listening to. They're not all claiming that. I haven't worked on those claims. The most common claim is, look, the government is corrupt. The gangs have infiltrated their government. They're being threatened. They're being shaken down. They have small businesses over there. They're being told that they have to join these organizations or do these illegal things, lest their entire family be murdered and killed. And they're fleeing violence that's been perpetrated on them by their governments. That would fit any definition of the government.
But gangs are not the government.
Yeah. Except you and Trump know that that's bullshit. You know that. MS-13 has been said by Trump and his people to be one and the same with Mexican government, basically.
No, cartels have been one and the same in the government.
You're right. I don't know if MS-13 is a cartel or not, but cartel violence is essentially gang violence by your definition. I understand what the code says with respect to Mexico. Now, in Mexico, they outlawed you can't just say that you're the victim of gang violence and plead asylum. They changed that specifically for Mexico. It didn't change for any other country. It didn't. You could still plead that and have a valid asylum claim. It changed for Mexico. Why? I don't know. But they did. They changed it. The problem with that is you had to start making claims and you had to start bridging the gap between, okay, well, how disconnected is the government from these cartels? In a sense, does cartel gang violence amount to being persecuted by your government because of failure to protect, or maybe they're cooperating with the cartels? And we were making
these Mexican states are basically failing to the point where the cartels are taking over functionally.
Well, negative, because I have personally won appellate cases on these asylum cases, making that exact argument, and I was victorious because they're starting to recognize, yeah, there's definitely some intertwinement there that we can't account for. There's obviously some government cooperation with the cartels. That makes a lot of sense to us. We're going to approve your application. And you're not supposed to be able to win immigration appeals, but I won like 8 of them because I was able to make that connection. And so you're wrong with respect to that. But the fact that we're arguing about this highlights this one important part. I'm highlighting to you the reasons why people are making these asylum claims. I'm telling you that they are being persecuted by cartels, government, whatever. Their lives are in danger. So they flee seeking protections in America. And you yourself told me that, well, just because you have a winning asylum claim doesn't mean you get to stay here. They could just ship you to a different country. And yeah, that's true. That's part of the process of asylum. But then, you don't ask these questions of these 60 white immigrants from South Africa who filed claims for asylum, claiming extreme prejudice. Now you're saying by the government, but what those applications really actually said was by the people of that country, the natives of that country. It was an entanglement, the same way that all of these other countries entangle their asylum claims. There's always an aspect of nativism, of native crimes, of gang violence that has nothing to do with the government, that the government refuses or allows to continue. That becomes the basis of government persecution. Now, when I make that argument for the South Africans, I'm willing to guess that you're okay with it. Why then would you have a problem with it when people south of the border are claiming that very thing in much uglier cases, by the way?
Because I would say that South Africans facing racial hardship, which is codified into the asylum claims, is much easier to prove than to say that.
Give me an example.
That these white citizen farm owners in South Africa are then being told that they have to give up their land or
Is that
get
all?
murdered.
Oh yeah, no. You're wrong. You and I are on the same page with that. Okay, so that's what you're saying, right? I had a kid. He was 17 years old. He was being forced to work with the local law enforcement in Guatemala. And they were asking him to do things, and they basically said, "Your family's going to be giving us this much money, or we're going to kill all of you." And then one day they couldn't pay. They kicked in his front doors. He fled because the family got tipped off like earlier that day. He fled. A half hour after he fled, his parents were murdered. He got here with the help. He took this long route to getting in here. I think he went through like I don't know. Eventually, he ended up in California. He gets here. His parents are gone, so he is now a juvenile seeking special immigrant protective status, and that's exactly what happened to him. They threatened his family. They burned down his house. They murdered his parents. They said, if you don't comply, we're going to murder you too. That's exactly what these South Africaners are doing. How is it any different, Brad?
I can't speak for the difference, but the fact that you
hold
have
on. But hold on, Brad. No. Let's not gloss over the topic. I just told you I gave you a similar fact pattern to what you just described with these South Africaners. Where exactly is the difference? Take away the names of the countries. What is the difference?
the government. Because unlawfulness in the streets by gangs can be a corrupt city issue, but it may not be a federal government issue, whereas the Afrikaners are dealing with their federal government enacting laws.
How do you know that, Brad?
It was just passed in January.
Well, look. I know for a fact that there are cases where government working with gangs or cartels or the equivalent or vigilantes or whatever have been found to be forms of government prosecution legally. And I've made these legal appellate arguments to great success. They've been found historically to be also
arms of the government.
Yes. Narco politics is one subset of these asylum claims. And so my question to you is, if their claims meet the standards, Trump has blocked all of their asylum claims so far, and they have just as bad cases to make as these South Africaners. But he let them all in. He welcomed them in. There was a greeting party there. They were chartered on a plane. And they were brought here with great fanfare. It's like, oh, look, we're doing all such good in the world. But we've shut the door on people south of the border because you're claiming, oh, but there's a provision. You can't just claim that you're in danger of gang violence and expect anything to happen. The reason why they're here, like Bukele, that guy is the freaking leader of the mob over there in El Salvador. You don't think that the people in El Salvador are being persecuted by gangs over there in El Salvador that are tied in with the government?
Not anymore.
Oh, because Bukele said, oh, no, it's the safest we've ever been. Sure it is, Dick. That's why he's got like a torture concentration camp where our people are being sent.
Okay.
I guess I'm just asking you to make the distinction. Tell me what is different about the asylum claims south of the border that are arguing that they're being persecuted by their government by virtue of gang violence because it's an arm of the government, and your South Africaners who are, but they're being persecuted by the government. They have therefore, just let them in.
But in using your same argument and saying that these gangs are de facto arms of the government, like Trende Aragua.
My argument works, though, is the point. It's a legally justified and well-litigated argument that works. It's not me just bullshitting.
I'm not saying you are.
I know, but I'm telling you that legally that's how it works. If you have a claim where you are being persecuted by people that are arms of the government, then you have a valid asylum claim. And now you were attempting to make a distinction. And my question is, what exactly is the distinction?
I don't have a distinction, but I was going to say that if Trende Aragua is a de facto arm of the government, then their operation within the United States would truly be for the Alien Enemies Act, in that they are invading the United States and trying to operate. Do you not see that?
No. You're talking about 1798, the Alien Enemies Act?
Yes.
You think that we're under invasion right now?
If Tren de Aragua feels that they can operate within the United States, taking over apartment buildings within Colorado, then yeah, I think so.
Okay, but you haven't answered my question. What is the distinction between the white countries claiming asylum for government persecution or whatever you're saying, versus these South American countries that are doing the same thing?
I don't know, that they're functionally the same, and Trump said
so then, okay, but you started with this premise. You started with this premise that, they're filing asylum claims and they're bullshit and they're just being allowed to like run free willy-nilly and do whatever they want, and they're committing crimes and they're murdering and raping our women and all of the, I mean, I know you didn't say that, but that's
I didn't say that, but
you specifically didn't say that, but that's what Stephen Miller says. And they are, they're allowing one form of claim and not the other. If I'm to take Trump and his administration at their word, but we're not playing by the same rules, then what is that? It doesn't look to me like they're concerned about immigration policy. It looks to me like they're concerned with whitewashing America. That's what I see when I see those two juxtaposed examples.
No,
that seems to be their objective.
And I'll say this: you made the argument yesterday about a Bostonian Irish saying that there's illegal Irish in the area, and why aren't they being removed?
Oh, that was a news article that I was reading.
That was a news article.
Yeah.
You were referencing that yesterday.
They were making the argument. I was just reading it.
I'll say it regardless. If you're in the country without status, without reason, get the fuck out. I'll say it right now. Whether you're Irish, whether you're Russian, whether you're Chinese, whether you're African, whether you're South American, get out.
All right, I appreciate that. I appreciate you saying that, and I'm not disagreeing with you on that.
Because it's not racism. It's the only thing that can be is nativist. But we as a country are allowed to determine who we want to be here legally.
Oh, just the whites then?
I didn't say just the whites.
I know you didn't say that. I know you're trying really hard to make it make sense. But it looks to me like that's what they're trying to do.
No, because
convince me otherwise.
Because the country sets immigration goals, targets, quotas of who we want to allow in. And we then say, okay, well, if we're going to allow 1% of our population into the year as immigration, and then we say, okay, we're going to allow 25,000 from Mexico, 50,000 from Guatemala, another 25,000 from Nicaragua, whatever these
they do
amounts.
They
do.
Yeah.
We say we're going to allow this amount of people in because this is what we feel is small enough to where it's not going to make a negligible impact on the population, and also allow us to ensure that we have a control on the system so that we are properly vetting these people as they come into the country, and it's not overwhelming our system.
It's never overwhelmed our system.
What?
It's never overwhelmed our system.
I find that hard to believe. That
bring up numbers. I'm sure you have numbers.
2022, 1.754 million more encounters at the border than the 234,000 removals and 258,000 returns plus Title 42 expulsions.
What do those numbers mean, though? You're saying overwhelm the system like America's breaking because there's so many illegals here.
Right.
But hold on. Now, I've been hearing that argument. And I'm pushing back on it because, look, I've been hearing that since the 90s, man. Really since the 80s, since Reagan did the amnesty thing back in 1987. He just, look, if you're here, just an amnesty, forgiven, whatever, start over. That pissed off so many people that from that time on, from 87, John and Ken, I'm sure you don't know who they are because they're like an AM talk show radio program in California, but they were railing on for years about, all the illegals. And I'm like, what are they even doing? Oh, they're taking all the jobs. What jobs? They're all applying for welfare. Are they really? Because what's the numbers on that? What's the actual numbers between American citizens that are taking advantage of those provisions versus illegals? I guarantee you it's minuscule compared to what Americans are doing. Now, when you say overwhelm, I assume that you mean that the country is breaking. We have no more resources for our citizens because of our immigration policies. And that's always just been fundamentally bullshit. There's no statistics. There's no facts that are just going to support that proposition. There isn't. You can make arguments and say, we're overwhelmed because people are trying to get in. That doesn't mean that our immigration system is broken and that illegals are the source of all evils in the country. It's just not a thing.
I'm not saying it's the evils of all country, but
you said overwhelm, and you can't just say that because that word has meaning. We've been overwhelmed. What does overwhelmed mean? Does it mean that our country is broken? We literally can't handle it? Or has it been overstated so that Stephen Miller could get in there and promote these evil, draconian, authoritarian...
No, fuck Stephen Miller. I don't care about him. But the point is, you look at New York City, you look at these places where they were renting out hotels to try and accompany all of these immigrants that were flooding into the city. And they were staying at hotels that cost $500 a night to be able to try and house these people because they had no more beds to be able to put out for them. Yeah. And they said that this is fine and normal. And you are seeing decreases in education because schools now have to figure out how are we going to get more ESL people into these schools to be able to accompany all of these new immigrant children that were not there 5 or 10 years ago, because the demographics are changing because of the amount of immigration that's happening in some of these cities. And some of these cities have brought it on themselves. New York, Los Angeles, Colorado have these what's the term? Sanctuary city policies. They say, no, we're not going to allow ICE agents to come in and take these people away. And they go, okay, well, then you're going to have to bear the brunt of the cost of all of these programs because you're taking this stance. And then if the federal government says, well, if you're going to have these policies, then we're not going to give federal funds to you because you're not participating with these ICE detention requests.
So that's the logistics of it, and you're not wrong in any of those issues. You're not, because those are a problem. But what you're not revealing is that how big of a problem is it actually that we need to cut Head Start programs, that we need to get rid of ESL programs for children that have been here, since they were babies and they have to learn English as a second language. It's such a burden on our economy that it's ruining our education. And so the response to that is DEI. Let's only teach the history that we want to teach. Let's get rid of the Head Start program. Let's get rid of funding for lunches for kids that can't afford it. Because
I didn't say that.
I know you didn't. I'm deliberately making the tie-in because that's kind of what they're doing. While all the while feeding you this bullshit that somehow immigration is the source of our educational evils. And I'm telling you that it's a red herring. I'm telling you that is not even remotely the issue with our public schools. People blame it on the immigrants. People like Stephen Miller. I know you don't give a shit about that guy. I know that. But he's the one he's the mouthpiece right now. People like Stephen Miller are saying that immigrants are the source of all of our evils. And you're taking it hook, line, and sinker, and you're not looking at the actual issues. Yeah, it costs money, but it's like 0.5% of the entire expenditures that it would take to
New York City.
Well, I'm sure it's different in every state. I'm just saying it's not so much that our system is broken and that our education is broken because of our immigration policies. That was a lie that you were sold and you believed it. I mean, you were lied to. Point blank, you were lied to. You're gonna point to all of the talking points that Trump has said on his trail, all of the talking points that he's extracted from Project 2025 that were the sources of the compilation of Project 2025, and you're going to say that this is justified because these people are ruining our country. We need to get America back to what it used to be in 1898.
Here, I pulled up some clips, so let's listen to Democrats' own mouth talking about this.
Oh, I got to share them. Okay.
So first up, we've got Mr. Chucky Schumer.
Yeah.
We must create a system that converts the current flow of primarily low-skilled illegal immigrants into the United States into a more manageable and controlled flow of legal immigrants.
All right. Now, what did he say there? Managed and controlled flow, which means that it is currently unmanaged, uncontrolled, overwhelming.
What he's saying is, what he's saying is we need to have a mechanism for converting these unskilled immigrants into skilled immigrants that could benefit the country. That's what I heard. And the takeaway from that is this gave birth to DACA. I'm pretty sure it was around 2008, 2009 where that program was implemented. And then we said, look, we're not going to deport you. Just avail yourself to us. Don't commit crimes. You could go to school, go to college, become a productive member of society, and you'll be fine. And then they were. And it was a wildly successful program in the United States for the entirety of Obama's term. That's what he's getting at.
No, because
you're focused on the wrong thing.
No, we keep going.
Or by our economy. Let me elaborate. The first of these 7 principles is that illegal immigration is wrong, plain and simple.
All right.
I don't disagree with that.
So, but the problem is when people say if it's wrong, and then if you're found and having committed a crime, then you'll be deported. The problem with that framing is that it removes the fact that they are here illegally and should be deported.
No. We've already had that discussion. No. Just because they're here illegally doesn't make them criminals.
I didn't say that, even though it is true.
Right, but what you said was that they're here illegally, they don't have status, and they have no path to status. They're removable, and they usually are, like expeditiously. That's always been the policy, as far as I understood it. I used to be an immigration attorney. I don't want to keep saying that, but I'm just saying when I would have, sometimes I'd have to have really hard conversations with families. It's like, I don't get it. It's like, look, he doesn't have status. He came here illegally. He doesn't have a path to status. You can't apply for him. He doesn't have a path to a legal green card. I can't stop him from being deported. It's why I'm not an immigration attorney, because it sucks, because you lose all the time, because you got to continuously have these really emotionally charged conversations with family members. I can't save your dad. I can't save your mom. I can't save your brother. They're here illegally. They committed crimes. They got to go. Jesus couldn't save them at this point. There's nothing I could do. They got crime. They got 4 DUIs. They got no status. They don't have an ability to forge a path to citizenship. They're gone. I'd have to have them all the time.
But if they have 4 DUIs, if they have 4 DUIs, that means there was 3 DUIs and nothing was done. Or if something was done, they came back into the country, and that's still a problem.
They're deportable after the first one. But here's the thing. Technically, not really. There's still some discretion there. Look, if your argument is going to be that people that are here illegally without a path to status, should they be expeditiously removed? Yeah. The problem is, like 90% of the time, there is a path to citizenship. There just is. And so you likely, I mean, I know that the quota is like 12 to 1,500 deportations a day. We've already gotten rid of the obvious ones. That's why you're rounding up U.S. citizens and green card holders, visa holders, because there's only so many of those folks. Those are the obvious cases. But even those obvious cases, they get due process, which kind of was my point. I don't disagree with what Schumer's saying. You can't just have unfettered immigration policies where you have people just running amok. Obama had this idea that, look, we're going to go after only the bad ones, only the criminals. And he made it such, he deported more people in his administration than any other president, I'm pretty sure, in history. I'm pretty sure. You could double check me on that. I might be wrong. Certainly more than Trump. I'm pretty sure more than Biden. But he deported a lot. And it was because he was so unflinching when it came to people that he had in proceedings that committed crimes. No, you're gone. Sorry. But if you were just like, you were brought here like when you were 2 and you haven't committed crimes, you don't even speak the language of your native country, you don't know anybody over there, but you're here. He said, all right, fine. Give us your contact information. Keep tabs with us. You can go to school. We're not going to deport you. Don't commit crimes. We'll give you a path to getting a green card, which will get you a path to citizenship. It was a way to invest in the resources of these people in a way that benefited America. And it was so wildly successful. What's wrong with that, Brad?
Because the sending of kids to another country is fundamentally wrong.
Well, guess what? They can't do nothing about it. They got here when they were 2. Now they're adults and they're deportable. So what do we do with them? But Obama had this idea, the Dreamers, right? He called it the Dreamers. DACA.
Yeah, he called it the Dreamers. That's
What
fine.
was wrong- what was wrong with that program?
He put an emotionally named program out for the idea.
No, we don't care about. I realize that a lot of this is sensational. What is wrong with the idea of giving these people an opportunity to become citizens if they're productive and going to benefit the country? That was his vision.
Because
It's not
what
emotional.
stops any family from sending their 2-year-old to the country? Nothing.
So then you want to deter people from coming over.
Yes.
It's not the white ones.
No, that's a false equivalency. Don't
No, it
go
isn't,
there.
because you didn't want to attack these other 60 people that were being persecuted in South Africa, that were
2-year-olds being sent unaccompanied.
Well, look, you can't do anything about it. They're here.
Well, but that's the problem, though. You're saying, well, we're the Keystone Cops or Barney Fife over here of figuring out what we can do with these people. Like, oh, we can send these people back, but we can't send these ones back because these are our special cases.
All right. So then your solution is to just round up all the children and, leave them to their own devices. I'm sure, right?
Leave them to their own devices.
We don't want to have emotional empathy tied to any of these policies. You came here when you were 2 through no fault of your own. You're a productive member of society. You're currently enrolled in the University of Virginia. You got a 4.2 GPA. You're well on your way to getting some kind of like microengineering degree and becoming, maybe doing some cancer research to benefit children from St. Jude or something. But no, fuck you. We need to deter other people from doing similar things. You're deported.
If you have such great skills, then you can go make your country of origin better.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Well,
and then you've experienced the internet. You have the ability to have a cell phone. You can go through the legal pathways in order to become a citizen from your home country of origin.
Look, I get that. I feel like your position, taking this hardline stance of immigrants, is your personal beliefs on immigration policy. I'm not going to change your mind on that. You're not going to change mine on my idea where we should invest in people that are going to benefit the country and kick the ones out that are not. One of those is easier to do than the others. One of them makes resources into people that would normally be a problem, but allows them to become citizens because, hey, man, deterrence is important. Sure it is. But we were pretty good at deterring folks.
Wrong. We have decades of immigration failures to show that deterrence has not actually occurred.
So is the solution then to round up people that are here legally without due process and deport them without a proper hearing?
No, but I think activating the military and putting them on the border to deter people is the better option.
They're already at the border, sir. I'm going to the border.
No. Activating the Roosevelt territory was not done until Trump came into office.
Yeah, well, that's nonsense because
and then saw the largest decrease in attempted border crossings in 40 years.
Well, if that was your goal, I guess. At the expense of who?
Because now they either
hold on. At the expense of who?
The men and women who voluntarily signed up to go into the military.
No. At the expense of who?
The
people that are
US
here
taxpayer?
legally, U.S. citizens that have been deported, have no access to come back into the country because of Trump's draconian policies. Now it's not just first of all, we're getting into a deeper argument, but nobody in the world stage right now takes us serious because we're not a country of our word. Nobody knows what we're going to do. People aren't coming here because they're so deterred by our immigration policies. They're coming here because our country's a wreck. They'll be back when Trump is out. And what do you think is going to happen in a couple of years when all of these groups are rising up because they're not down with Trump's draconian policies in terms of how he's handling things, not just with immigration, but with the entire Project 2025. He has this for 2 years and then it's going to be gone. He's going to lose the House and he's going to lose the Senate. And then after that, he's going to lose the White House because anybody that wants to vote for Trump after this, after what's gone down so far, if something doesn't change, you're going to you might be looking at AOC as the president. I know how you feel about that.
I mean, honestly, looking at the Democrat field, that would be the smartest decision would be to try and go for an AOC as president. But I don't think it will pan out the way that people think it is.
Well, maybe not. I'm just saying that, look, we're losing a lot of credibility on the world stage because Trump has turned America into 1933 Germany.
No, I don't think that. And I think that's over sensationalized.
Well, let's just go. No, bullshit. No. I'm not just going to let you just hand wave that away. No. I sent you the cases. No.
I got the cases.
Tell me how we're not. Mahmoud Khalil, Palestinian graduate, legally in the U.S. on a student visa, arrested by ICE at his New York apartment building on March 8th.
Yep.
He was a prominent voice in campus activism. He was participating in these pro-Palestinian protests. ICE threatens to arrest his wife, who was a U.S. citizen, 8 months pregnant. They don't allow him to attend the birth of his child. He's still currently being held in an ICE detention center. That is the equivalent to state prison, 1,000 miles away from where he lives, away from his
Louisiana.
family. Yeah.
I've read about it.
You're cool with that?
I think that if we've identified
Answer the question. No. Answer the question.
Hold on. If we've identified executive branch authority that we do not want instilled in the Secretary of State, then we should propose legislation to remove it.
What are you talking about?
The whole crux of the argument is that the student visa program should not be at the will of the Secretary of State making a decision based on the foreign policy debate.
That might be your philosophy, but it's not the law.
It is the law.
He's here legally on a student visa.
And the Secretary of State can make determinations that he is a risk to public policy.
Based on what? A risk
doesn't matter.
No. What do you mean it doesn't matter?
Because a judge hold on, a judge in Khalil's case saw the arguments and said yes. The Secretary of State made a successful claim that his activism presents a risk to the government. And a judge said, yes, they have met the burdens under the statute in order for his removal, and his removal can proceed. Whether you agree with it or not is different. Now, what goes back to my previous argument?
Okay, first of all, if that finding was made, he wouldn't be in this country right now.
Because they're trying to appeal it.
No, it's not that. It's because, look, they made a prima facie case. Prima facie cases are not made with evidence. He was a member of a student body that was at a student-sponsored protest that we're supposed to have First Amendment rights protection, protected free speech. You're supposed to be able to talk about whatever you want with respect to government. There's no threat to that. If that's the case, they would have arrested them all. They didn't. They singled them out. And why?
No, why? There's currently
there were hundreds of people at that rally. He was arrested. He was put in proceedings. He hasn't been deported because he's not fucking deportable.
He was just adjudicated he's deportable.
All they made a finding of is that if he's legitimately found based on evidence to be an actual threat to the country, then sure, remove him like anybody else. It's really not hard to make a prima facie case. They haven't adjudicated his case. That's why he's still here. He's sitting in a Louisiana detention center because when they eventually do adjudicate his case, hopefully they do it faster, sooner rather than later. They're going to make a finding that he's not a threat to the country because he attended a student rally at a school-sponsored event that was standing for, Palestinian protests.
He's been in the Students for Palestine movement at Columbia University for some years now, since 2023.
So what? What's the First Amendment mean to you then?
The student visas are not held to the same standard.
I don't care if it was a Triple K rally. He's got a freedom of speech. He is a person legally here in America. He has the right to make educational decisions, to stand up for whatever cause he thinks is just. If that's the case, let's start walking in and deporting KKK members. Why don't we start doing that? In my opinion,
I don't think you're going to find a non-U.S. citizen KKK member.
You'd be wrong on that. You'd be wrong on that case, sir.
You think there's Swedish KKK members that are in the United States on student visas?
KKK members. I don't know what you know about that organization. You'd be surprised.
I've heard of the one black guy who joined the KKK and then ended up converting people out. But
I know. There's the Dave Chappelle skits.
No, not that. I'm talking about a legitimate.
I know they made a Netflix documentary about the guy. I'm not talking about it.
He deconverted like 3 or 4 KKK members by just.
There's Hispanic members of the Triple K. Did you know that? There's Hispanic members of the KKK.
I've not heard of that, but
and look, what does it matter? What does it matter if you're here legally? It shouldn't matter. If you're a threat to the country, deport your ass to El Salvador.
He was adjudicated. I don't know what you want me to tell.
No, man, I want you to say, look, you think that he's a national threat to security because he was at some.
I don't think he is. The government did. That's the problem.
No, bro. Okay, I understand what you're saying, but at the end of the day, he's going to be found not to be a threat. And I'm telling you that there are bigger threats out there that nobody's prosecuting, which speaks to my larger argument that it doesn't look like they give a shit about the white immigrants. They're going after the darker skinned immigrants, which is why I'm harping on the facts so hard, because the actions taken by this government spells exactly that. They're not concerned with the white folks. They will never make an argument that the KKK is a national threat to security. Never. They will deport U.S. citizens that attend pro-Palestinian events.
And they haven't done U.S. citizens.
He's here legally. He had a path to sit.
That is not a citizen, though.
He had a path to citizenship. Are you aware that this guy was married to a U.S.
He's married to a U.S. citizen. He has a child that is now born. Yes, I know.
Gives him an affirmative path to U.S. citizenship, and you can't argue against that.
But the problem is Obreya Garcia was married to his wife, and he still hadn't gone through that.
I'm purposefully not talking about him because I'm not going to make him the subject of. Look, I know about the lies that have been told about him. I know what you've been looking at to think that he's a criminal. The point isn't even that you think that he's a criminal. The point is that he's not been afforded due process. And you keep on confusing the two issues. It's never been about whether or not they're criminals or not. It's look, I agree. The facts are important. The facts are important, but we never get to the facts if you don't have due process. You seem to be okay suggesting that we can just deport folks that are here legally or not without even so much as a hearing to make a determination about whether or not they are worthy of deportation. There's no prejudice to the country when they're already in deportation proceedings because they're literally incarcerated in ICE detention centers that are the equivalent of high maximum security state prisons.
What the problem
is, in there are miserable. I can't stress enough. I've been to those places. There's no difference between them and state prisons. Just there isn't.
But the problem is that when you give these what was the term that I called it? Sorry. Full civil panels by jury to adjudicate particular facts of whether or not someone's an MS-13 gang member or.
Do you believe the photoshopped image of Kilmar's hand, his knuckles? The Times New Roman font, MS-13 thing?
I believe the pictures on his knuckles are representative of the letters that were placed over top of them.
So you believe the Times New...
no, I didn't say that.
Okay. Because I know he had tattoos on his knuckles. Those tattoos, are you aware they have nothing to do with MS-13?
They do. Tattoos? They absolutely do.
On what? Give me an image.
Because the images are representative of the letters MS-13.
No, they're not, Brad. I'm not even going to get distracted with that. Bruce wants to know I think Omar should decide if he wants to debate policy or debate instances of specific cases. I don't want to debate instances of specific cases because it ignores the general premise. that look.
But that was my problem when we were talking privately. As I said, you gave me all of these cases, and I can start digging into the cases and try and argue fact-specific questions.
I know, but my point in sending you those cases was not that there's individual cases that are going to end up in non-deportation because of their specific facts. The point was they're being held in detention centers without due process, without access to an attorney, without access to the things that they're supposed to be guaranteed by the Constitution. Now, look, there's some people that say that, look, if you come here illegally, you're not entitled to shit. The Constitution would disagree with you, and that we're just going to have an educational disagreement because the Constitution specifically says every person in the United States, not U.S. citizens, shall be afforded due process. Every. That means if we're going to kick you out, you're going to go before a tribunal or a judge, and we will get to the bottom of whatever it is and decide that you can stay or you got to go. But you want to argue these specific cases because you want to do the thing that we've been doing for hundreds of years, which is determining on a case-by-case basis whether or not somebody should be deported. All I'm asking is that these persons get due process. Instead, Trump is loading up on planes and shipping them to El Salvador without due process, afoul of the Constitution and against Supreme Court orders.
Well, no, the Supreme Court orders, they were already out before the Supreme Court said, no, you got to get him back. And it's like, well, no, he's in hands of El Salvador.
I know what Stephen Miller said.
But because like in researching Mahmoud Khalil, he was within Manhattan District. His lawyer.
Hold your thought, Brad. Bruce, I just wanted to point out that I'm not the one arguing the specific instances, the specific case instances. Brad literally keeps going into this. I'm trying to argue the policy, but he wants to keep on giving me the specific details. I'm sorry,
but
Bruce.
The problem is you're making these statements, but these statements are running afoul of the fact patterns within specific portions of the cases.
What are you even talking about? What do you mean afoul of what fact patterns?
All right. Mahmoud Khalil was detained by ICE. He was told that he was going to be held at some certain Manhattan building that's notable.
Louisiana.
Hold on. No, not just that. His lawyer was writing his writ of habeas corpus to actually give him the due process to be able to figure out what the heck is going on, and was making phone calls using the deportee locator app or service, whatever the case may be, to try and figure out where the heck your person is if you're outside of the system, and received affirmations that he was in Manhattan still. So they filed the case in Manhattan, but coincidentally enough, he was being moved to New Jersey.
What is your point in bringing this up?
Because you're saying that he was whisked away 1,000 miles without due process, without this stuff. He was in the process of trying to get due process by a lawyer.
I'll tell you what, though. The fact that he was moved 1,000 miles away never happened. Never happens.
Well, he went to New Jersey before he went to Louisiana. I don't know why he went to Louisiana, and I don't know why
Let me just explain. When I was an immigration attorney, there's 3 detention centers near me. There's one in LA, there's one in Adelanto, there's one in San Bernardino. Whenever somebody was deported in Southern California, they went to one of those 3 centers without fail. There was never a reason to move them 1,000 miles away to the middle of the country unless they took up residence there.
I have no...
And the only reason he's being moved 1,000 miles away, I guess I can't really say if it's the only reason, but it appears because it's separating him from his family. It's making it harder for him to have access to attorneys. His attorney can't hire an attorney and be there present with him because he's 1,000 miles away. He's completely isolated from the people that he knows. He's being held there in essentially a state prison department because he attended, I can't emphasize enough, a school-sponsored pro-Palestine rally.
School-sponsored. Because that would be a really big stretch to say that Columbia University sponsored those student organization activities.
Activist. There was a group that regularly held protests, and it was pro-Palestinian in nature. If it wasn't sponsored directly, they certainly didn't shut it down. And it was on campus. That's about as sponsored as he could get. I can't just like walk up to UCLA and start spouting off nonsense unless they know who I am and why I'm there and what I'm going to say.
I don't know. I think UCLA will pretty much allow anyone to speak on there regardless.
I visited there pretty recently, and that's certainly not the case. Although they do have an eclectic group of student bodies and student groups, I should say. What do you think about? I mean, I don't want to get into this. Look, true or false? People that are put into removal proceedings should be afforded, at the very least, due process to verify that they are removable and that they don't have a path to
The
status.
process that is due. I will say that.
No. Don't bullshit around. Just
No.
true or false.
Because the problem is
Hold on, Brad.
there
Hold
are-
on, Brad. I need a yes or no. True or false? People that are placed in removal proceedings are entitled to due process to determine whether or not they're actually removable and whether or not they have a path to status. That's a true or false question.
but you're loading it. That's the problem.
Nope. Just say yes or no. Either they are or they aren't. And if they're not, I want to hear an explanation why.
I'm intentionally taking my time to think.
That's a wise move.
Oh, hush, chat.
I don't know what the chat is saying. I should be looking at the chat. I've been accused of not paying attention to chat. It's not that I'm not paying attention. I just get into my modes.
Yeah, I get it.
Oh, my brother's in the chat. Do we need to stare at Chuck Schumer and his house? We don't. I'm sorry, Chris.
But yeah, everyone is saying due process, but the problem is due process has varying levels within it.
No, it doesn't, Brad. Look, there's substantive and procedural.
You have
There's literally only two kinds. There's not levels.
yes.
All due process states is we have to verify through a proper tribunal or a court whether or not somebody is guilty of the thing that they purport to be guilty of. That's all it means. So, okay, I have an illegal immigrant who's here without status. He has no path to status, and he's committed crimes. You hold a hearing, you verify those facts, and you expeditiously remove him to his country of origin. That's due process. What's wrong with that? First of all, it's not even what's wrong with that. That's what's promised in the Constitution. It's what's guaranteed in the Constitution.
But the problem is you have, with that fact pattern, if they're accused of crimes, then people will say, well, he needs to be fully adjudicated against those crimes.
That is fully adjudicated, though, because that's really quick. And look, we don't have to have an evidentiary hearing. What's his rap sheet? It'll be adjudicated by virtue of the fact that, in Colorado, he committed first-degree murder or first-degree sexual assault or some kind of crime, and it will be validated by a proper government seal. And so, therefore, there's no, look, he was convicted of this crime. Does he have any status? No. We got records on him. He came in. We don't have any record of him, of his entry, but we have him here. He has no status. Does he have path to status? The path to status is usually answered by an immigration attorney. He has a right to have an attorney, or at least the ability to hire one. In criminal courts, that's more of a thing. But in immigration court, you don't necessarily have that right. But still, you have the ability to make a case that you have a path. And in that scenario, even if he had a path to citizenship, it would be superseded by the fact that he committed violent crimes. They would expeditiously remove him within a week, put him on a plane to his country of origin, and then we would be done. But he would have had due process, is the point. It's not layered in the way that you think it's layered, Brad. It's very simple. It is one of the most simple, fundamental, constitutional questions that I could possibly ask you. And that's all I'm trying to get to the bottom of. Because if your answer is yes, that he should have due process, that's all I'm saying. And then we agree. If your answer is no, you're going to have to explain to me like I'm 5 how the Constitution does not allow for due process in that scenario. And I don't want to hear Stephen Miller's regurgitated arguments because they're wrong. They're just wrong. As a constitutional scholar for all my life, he's wrong. I want to hear it from your own mouth about why you think that, so we can come to an understanding.
Because I would argue that someone is that everyone should be given due process.
Then we agree.
Yes, then we agree.
Hey,
however, in cases there, because a immigration court is not the same as a traditional federal court that most would consider. It's an attorney that's appointed by the Department of Justice in order to adjudicate these claims.
Let me describe immigration court for you. They usually have a government attorney, somebody that's representing the government. Basically, look at them as like they're the prosecutor, right? Look at them as if they're the DA. And then you have the immigrants. Sometimes they're representing themselves. Sometimes they're represented by an immigration attorney. And there's a judge. They don't get jury trials or anything, but they get the opportunity to tell the judge that the first question is are they removable? We have to make a finding that they're removable. That's the question number one. Yes. Do they have a path to relief? It's yes or no. And if the answer is no, then all right, well, then they're gone. If the answer is yes, they do. Have they committed crimes? It's either no or yes. If it's yes, they're gone. If it's no, it's like, okay, well, what is their application for relief? And then they give them an opportunity to file an application for relief, but it's within the confines of the immigration code in America. And that's all we ask. That's all we ask. And I'm not even debate. Look, I know you disagree with the DACA thing. I don't know why you disagree with it, but you do. We were talking about earlier about this, what's with Trump allowing some asylum claims over the others. How do you effing know what their claims are? You're assuming that they're all gang violence. I promise you, and I could tell you with 100% confidence that they are all not because of gang violence.
I didn't say it was gang violence.
I know, but you assumed.
Well, if they're
I'm not trying to take you back there. I'm just, look, we're making progress here. You say that everybody should have due process, right? That's all. That's all I'm asking for people, is that they get the opportunity to present their case. I don't ever want to see a 4-year-old in a position where they're not there with their parents. They're not there with an attorney representing their cause, where they're just there because of some foster parent brought them there amongst a group home, and they are then in front of an immigration judge who's literally telling them, hey, little 4-year-old, you are here because I'm trying to figure out if you're allowed to stay here or not. And they don't know what the F is going on. One guy's wearing like a Bullwinkle shirt. One guy has like a SpongeBob shirt on. One little girl's holding like this stuffed animal. That's what's happening in the courts right now. That's not what due process is. And those kids are largely citizens, by the way. Regardless of what you think about birthright citizenship or whatnot, those kids were born in America. They're citizens. They're here legally, and they're in these removal proceedings, but you'll never know because due process has not been afforded to them. My only quarrel with your position is that you railed against this idea. My main proposition in like a few weeks now of arguing this is that we should allow these people to have due process. For some reason, you've like opposed me. Oh, what about the individual cases? My response to that was, well, then let them make their case. But that's what the definition of due process is, isn't it? So if you and I could agree on that, it's like I told you earlier, I don't think that you and I are necessarily in disagreements in immigration policy. Some policies, there's some disagreements that we have. I think DACA is a good thing. You don't think it's a good thing. You think that the South Africans have a better claim to asylum than the South Americans, which I disagree with because I've worked directly with those clients. And I can't convince you that. I'm not even going to try. I'm just going to tell you that the immigration laws are what they are. Trump's trying to change them, and it just appears that he's not really after the criminals, the criminal immigrants. What he's attempting to accomplish by the actions of what he's commissioned ICE to do is whitewash America.
No.
I know that makes you uncomfortable, but how could you say otherwise given what has been?
Because removing immigrants who came to the country illegally by virtue of them being of their country of origin is not you're using point B to prove point A. You're saying that you're intentionally trying to whitewash America by stating the fact that removing people who aren't supposed to be here is the end, or that the whitewashing is the end goal through the removal proceedings. But no, that's not the case.
I don't think it's Trump's end goal. I think it's your buddy Stephen Miller. It's not your buddy. I know he's not, Brad. I was going to say something and the thought just escaped me.
Again, because you could say, because of my religious faith, and I don't believe in.
I will never attack your religion or use your religion against you.
No. I'm saying those who are persecuted by their governments for their faith, and if you notice, there are those within the Middle East or elsewhere who are Christians who are persecuted and who would have an asylum claim.
Yeah. I'm not denying that. But you are denying South Americans who bring similar asylum claims to these South Africaners and saying that one is better than the other.
But I'm not deep in every South American claim to the government. And
you just made a blanket assumption about these 60 that were chartered on a plane and arriving to America with a great fanfare. You made an assumption that all of them had legitimate asylum claims without even giving them or examining their claims, and completely wrote off the South American countries, stating that, no, there's a law. You can't just claim gang violence and think that asylum is going to work. Assuming that that's what they were going to claim.
Because the State Department has already adjudicated their claims and said, yes, they're okay to come in.
Oh, well, then I guess case closed to the South Americans. Then what's that have to do with them? They got asylum claims too. Their cases are a lot uglier than the ones from South Africa.
I don't know what you want me to argue. I
want you to acknowledge. I want you to acknowledge that look, my eyes are open, sir. And if you take that to mean that I'm a woke individual because I'm aware of the history of this country, I can't pretend to not see the fact that we have shut the door on South American countries who bring asylum claims that are claiming to be persecuted by government by way of law enforcement that is connected to gangs and cartels that have every right to asylum claims historically in this country, but we're denying them. But we are literally throwing parties for these 60 white asylum claimants from South Africa. I can't pretend to not see that. What should I think when I see the disparity there? Let's just have some intellectual honesty right now. What do you see when you see that disparity? What am I to think when that is so blatantly thrown in my face?
I would say that how many asylum claims do we traditionally get from South Africa versus what we have been arguing and litigating against in public policy and debates across the country for decades about South American countries?
See, I didn't want to cut you off, but I'm not going to let you do the thing where you change the question because you don't like the answer. I want you to tell me, just with every bit of intellectual honesty that you have, what am I to think when I see the disparity in asylum claims where one is welcomed and the other is shunned? I ignore the history of stuff. I know what you want to say, but what am I to think? What are people of color to think when they see the disparity in how those claims are treated in America? What is the world to think?
I don't know what the world is supposed to think.
Look, Brad, you're a smart guy. I think you don't like the answer.
No, it's not that. The problem is that we allow hundreds of thousands of people into the country annually.
Hey, look, the uterus is in the chat. She gave me $5.
The what?
She gave me $2.50 because community property.
You said the what?
The uterus.
The uterus.
Yeah.
I don't know who the uterus is.
I placed my seed into her uterus.
Oh, okay.
We have a couple of kids.
Because I'm just like, wait, what? That was your wife is asking when you're going to be home because.
Oh, well, hopefully, I don't know. We'll see how much. I don't know. Hopefully on time. How about that? Oh, I have to check my phone. Oh
Yes.
shit! What happened?
That's what I said. You're being summoned.
Oh, what am I missing? Oh, I shouldn't read out my text now.
That's probably not a good idea. But
Oh, son of a!
you had a thing you were supposed to do today?
There was an event.
Oh.
I'm gonna have to cut this short, but we made.
But no, I can't answer your question because everyone's view of a certain debate is going to be based on their own experiences and how they feel about certain things.
I know, but I'm asking you for. I get that, Brad. I'm not trying to like put you on the spot or anything, but I would really like an answer to my question. And I want you to look. If you were to ask me a similar question, I would objectively try to answer it. And so I don't want you to be uncomfortable with the answer. I'm telling you that, look, I'm a person that views that as blatant racism being perpetrated by Trump's administration. I want you to tell me why that's not the case. And I don't want you to try to like change the issue. I just want you to answer that based on that observation. Because look, it's not just me. You know that there is a rising group, people of color, that are increasingly becoming aware that America of 2024 is no longer, that this new America of 2025 is different. And the last time that this happened, the 60s happened. That's what is at stake. And so it's an important question that I'm asking you. And I know that you don't have any ill will in your heart. I know that you don't have any ulterior motive. I just want you to intellectually answer this question. What am I to do with that observation that I've listed?
I can't tell you what to do with that observation.
Oh, hold on. Speak not just to me. Speak to people of color. What are they to make of that observation? Do you stand with them or not?
Well, that's stand with them in what? That's the problem.
Stand with them in that if Trump is legitimately trying to whitewash America, then I don't stand for that. I reject that because it's not American.
No, I don't think he's trying to whitewash America. And
I think you stand with us. Then you stand with us when I say that this observation that I have, that's where it comes from. I could only go by the actions of this administration. And when people of color are stating specifically that they're being targeted, and white immigrants are saying that, oh, I don't feel like there's anything wrong. I could navigate this country just fine because I could blend in or whatever. I'm just asking you to acknowledge that, look, it's a rising sentiment in this country, and it's going to give rise to political activism. The likes that we haven't seen in 60 years.
And Bruce puts it best. He says, at its best, it's bad optics, but at its worst, it's racism.
Right. And which is my point. And so at its perfectly succinctly put, at its best, it's bad optics, and the optics are terrible. So I'm asking you, are the optics in a best case scenario, could you at least acknowledge that the optics are bad?
Yeah, I'll say the optics are bad.
And at its worst, systemic racism. Would you be in agreement with that? In a worst case scenario, maybe it is.
At its worst case, yes, absolutely.
Okay, so we're somewhere in the middle, probably, right?
I would, but my argument is that the U.S. is in control of everything, and if someone was to say and find Marco Rubio or someone at INS having a policy and say, we're going to deny all the brown people and we're going to allow all the white people in, whether they're from Italy. But if it's policy and it's being broadcast, whether you could get memorandums, you could get people making statements and say, I was told at this time by this person that we are going to rubber stamp all of these applications for these folks and not these folks.
Well,
then that is a problem. I will absolutely 100% say yes, that is a problem.
Fist bump on that, sir. All right. Now look, it feels like They are rubber stamping certain immigrants and shunning others. That's what it feels like. And I'm tracking it. It's been 115 days or so, something like that, 110 days. And it appears that what is going down with the Trump administration, and it has people of color nervous. And I'm just telling you, man, the end results of this extremist approach is going to be that people are going to die. And
there's been people on our, there's been this underswelling feeling that the people talk about the boog and things like that, of this idea that America is headed for a civil war, a race war, of all these things for a long while now. And it's always been like this thing in the back of people's heads. It's like, oh, well, you know, is now the time? And people in internet culture memed it up, and they were like, oh yeah, is it going to be boog time? Are we really going to do it? But it wasn't.
Do you remember the LA riots?
I don't remember him. I was born in '89, so I wouldn't know.
That was pretty much a race war. LA was on fire. They looted the city. They murdered people. They went after cops. They went after civilians.
I've seen rooftop Koreans a number of times, but
yeah, I mean, the place was on fire. It was full on destruction, full on race war, if you want to call it that. I'm not even talking about just that. There was the Watts riots. There was the riots that occurred in St. Louis, going back into like the 1920s and 30s. It's always been. Look, you can't just pretend it's never happened. People have lost their lives.
There's been individual skirmishes throughout country. Yes,
I'm not even saying skirmishes, sir. I'm talking about full on war. Do you not know the history of like the Black Panthers?
I know the history of the Black Panthers
and all these militant organizations that would actively go into communities and view themselves at war.
Yes, and I would absolutely say that Antifa and BLM are acting in the same way as the Black Panthers did in the 60s.
It's not going to be Antifa next time.
That's what they are. That's the problem.
Well, I'm just saying that I don't think that Antifa is going to be the one that spawns from all of this. I'm just saying
they're already there. They've existed. Do you remember in the 2020 or 2021, the Summer of Love, as they called it, all of the Kyle Rittenhouse was in the news stream, and you had these protests, fire bombings of judicial courthouses, riots, people taking over entire city blocks in Seattle, saying that this is our space and the police are not going to be allowed in. Yeah. These things have existed in today's time frame, regardless of Trump, because Biden was in office then.
During Rittenhouse?
Yes, during Rittenhouse.
Are you sure?
21.
No way.
He won election in 2020, and then Rittenhouse was in 2021.
Rittenhouse incidents occur. 2020, August 25th, 2020. I'm pretty sure Trump was still in office at that time.
Trump was still in office when that occurred, but he wasn't tried until 21 or 22.
Oh, I know. His trial was much later. But I did support Rittenhouse. I don't think that kid deserved to be.
This isn't a debate about Rittenhouse specifically, but
I know it isn't.
The larger political atmosphere has been churning since then. But then, like, I remember back in 2009, Glenn Beck had rallies on the Capitol Square, and people were saying that it was the new KKK rally of Glenn Beck having this peace, hope, and love rallies that he held on the square. And I remember being there, and I saw like a Black Panther co-protest walking down the street with their signs.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so interesting because when there was a video that went out of post inauguration Obama, if you looked at the Capitol Square or the in front of the Lincoln Memorial and whatnot, it was like a barren wasteland and trash everywhere. But in the post Glenn Beck rallies, you wouldn't have thought that it was cleaner after a million people went into that square, then left and made it cleaner than what it was before. It was one of the most interesting perspectives on what was going on there. And I remember walking around. I got to stand on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial and see the stage overviewing the entire rotunda, and it was really interesting. And yes, IB, I understand people don't like Glenn Beck, but
I remember Glenn Beck when I was in Ohio.
well,
that's where I became familiar with him. I think he had an Ohio radio show. Maybe it was nationally syndicated or something. But Brad, I just I do got to wrap this up because I really do got to go. So in the
topic, called Restoring Honor. That's what it was called. Look it up. I really encourage everyone to take a look at it.
I guess my fear is it's not. Look, I understand what's been going on. My fear is that it's going to get a lot worse. The last thing that this country needs is another LA riots, another Watts riots, because it's just
not discounting the LA riots, but it wasn't widespread. It wasn't.
Oh no, it wasn't
nationwide.
I feel like this time it will be.
But
if it happens, I think it will be, because things are way too global nowadays. Information is spread way too easily, and I feel an undercurrent of something happening in the country. And if we ain't careful, if Trump's and his administration aren't careful, something bad is going to happen. What is going to happen? I don't know. I'm not the one running. I'm just saying that history tells me that something is going to happen. People are going to die. And so if we have these misunderstandings, all I'm asking you to agree with me on is not even all of our immigration philosophies. I just need you to agree with me that people should be given due process. Yeah. And you have agreed with me on that.
Yeah.
And if we could agree on that, then we could still be friends.
Well, no, I'm going to take the contrary view. People don't deserve due process just for the sake of I could write you off as a friend. No,
when you get the hell off of my no, I'm kidding. All right, Brad. But go ahead.
I was say, but there is nuance to some of these things, and when we remove the nuance, then it becomes a much difficult thing to try and continue to talk about. It's not all black and white. There's a whole lot of gray in law.
Not when it comes to due process, though. Look, yeah, there's a lot of nuance. I don't see it with respect to the examples that we've given today. As long as Trump surrounds himself with people like Stephen Miller, whom you don't like, then we're going to continue having these crisis debates. And the next time that you and I have this kind of debate, it might be after something nefarious happens in this country because people are fed up with it and the pressure cooker explodes and we'll be talking about some kind of tragedy.
I hope we don't get to that point. I hope that we can have continued discussions about things in a civil manner, regardless of everyone having their own opinions and whatnot.
See what Mahone says? I have a feeling Omar has to shut this down before his uterus kicks him in the nuts. She's right. I got to go. Brad.
No worries.
Hey, we'll do this again soon. You going to be on flat this? I might have to do flat early on like a Thursday.
Well,
I'll let you know the details. Yeah, I'll let you know. Anyway, hey, Brad. Oh, wait. I got this one.
Yep.
That's her telling me to get my ass. All right. I love you all, man. Hey, Brad. Love you, man.
Love you, man.
Take care of yourself.
See you.
Bye-bye.